Hello everyone, Noet Games here, back with another video on the Getaway Shootout series of remaking Getaway Shootout, a small subset of the base scripts in Unity. And Getaway Shootout is a game that I've previously made, which you can check out online. And also check out the first video for more information about this series. So in the last video, we were working with the camera movement, and what we got is a system where we can create a camera for each player and all the cameras follow the players, and that works great. But now we can get into a situation where the player falls into a trap like this, and we don't want the player just to be stuck here forever. It'd be nice for the player to actually die and respawn somewhere in the map where they can continue playing the game. So the way this is done in Getaway Shootout is player death is handled by triggering an event. This event then makes the player inactive, where you can't move the player, and it is known as a ragdoll. And with this ragdoll, after a certain amount of time, say 5 seconds, your player respawns at a certain position, ready to play. So that's what we're going to be doing and implementing in this video. So there are a couple ways of implementing that whole system I just talked about. Let me just describe 2 ways that you could go about this in Unity. So the first way, and this is the way that I did currently in Getaway Shootout, is something like this. You have your player, and your player has your player movement, and all the other player scripts attached to this object, which is how we have it so far. And then say your player dies at a position here. What I did in the Getaway Shootout is actually remove all the player scripts. So we disable the player movement and disable all the other player scripts attached to this game object. And once you have that, then the player will actually just be a ragdoll and move around and stay disabled throughout. And basically, once you have something like that, then you can wait, let's say, 5 seconds, and then respawn your player by creating a whole new object that initially has all the player movement and all the other player scripts activated on the player object. So that is one way of doing it. Downside being is that we're creating a whole new player object every time it respawns, and it's a tad bit annoying to deactivate all the player scripts that we want. Say if we forget something and then it's still on, then the player can still be controllable. So there's definitely downsides with this first approach. Second approach would be to actually create your ragdoll separately. So what I'm thinking is you have your player goes at some point, dies, like before, and this time, instead of disabling all the components, we actually create a copy of the player at the same exact position, rotation, and velocity, everything the same, and then we disable the first one. So we set the game object to false, so we completely disable it, and then we continue just with this new game object, this ragdoll object, we'll call it, And then this ragdoll continues to go around, bounce around the scene, and dies, and so forth. But the neat thing here too is after the 5 seconds, we actually use the previous game object that we still had and actually just set it back to active. So it would be something like game object and just set active to true. And then this would reactivate the object. Obviously, we'd have to set the position to the spawn point. But the nice thing about this approach is that the game object is never created, destroyed, and we don't have to deal with deactivating each component. We just have a completely separate object called the ragdoll, which is going to be a basic copy of the position, rotation, and velocity at that point. So it'll appear seamless that like it was just one continuous object, but behind the scenes is a whole separate object. And this is actually something I do in House of Hazards, and I like the system of doing it this way. So that's what we're going to do in this video. So I'm going to jump back here now in Unity, and I think we can get started on actually implementing this. So the first step in our diagram is that the player needs to trigger an event of death when we need to have the player die and go through that whole phase. So one way of doing this, in Getaway Shootout, there's zones where you can actually just die just by entering it. So that's what we'll do here. We'll call it death zone. So I'm just creating a game object called death zone, switching this back to normal. And all this death zone is going to have is a box collider, which is just going to be the zone that you die when you enter it. And I'm just going to make this a little bigger, and I'm going to place it right in our trap area here. Maybe I'll place it a little higher so player dies quicker. Okay, so that looks good there. The one thing that we'll have to do is somehow identify that this is a death zone. And an easy way to do that is using a tag. So I'm just going to create a tag and call it death. And we've created that tag. And then finally, you just have to assign that tag. And basically now this game object has that death tag. Okay, so we've created a zone now that's identified as a death zone. And we want the player to register this and then do all the logic of respawning and player ragdoll. So let's do that now. And I'm going to jump to the scripts folder and open up the player script. So the player script is where we're going to do this registering the death event for right now. And to do this, well, first let's find out when we first enter this death zone. And in Unity, this is on trigger enter. And I just forgot, this should be actually a trigger. Right now, it's a solid object. We don't want that. We want it to be transparent so the player can move through it, but notify the player when you move through it. So I'm clicking is triggered true. And so basically, when the player enters this zone, there'll be an on trigger enter. And we want to know if the trigger was with that death tag that we assigned. So I'm going to do if collision dot game object dot tag, and if it equals the death tag that we assigned, this is when we want to do the whole death logic. So I'm going to create a function here called maybe die. And yeah, we just call die. It's a little morbid, but yeah, we'll call the function die, and Let's see, the next thing, well, right now I'll just make sure that this is all working. Die, just by doing a simple debug. And we'll see in the console when the zone is entered, the player should print out die. So let's just make sure that's the case. Okay, so when they enter that zone, it triggers out die. So that's great. That's exactly what we wanted. So at this point, the next thing to do is create that ragdoll that I was talking about, that game object where it's just a physics object and the player is no longer active. So what I'm going to do, we might in the future want to make this a whole separate script for ragdoll, but I'm just going to include it on this script for right now, and I'm going to call it ragdoll. So this is a prefab. This is our ragdoll prefab. This is the thing that we want to instantiate. So I'm going to instantiate it by calling instantiate ragdoll. And we importantly want to give it the correct position and the correct rotation. So that's going to be our current position and our current game object's rotation. And I won't set a parent. I'll just leave that as is, and I'll get a reference of this. So game object, we'll call it ragdoll, or maybe just R for short. And with this ragdoll object, the next thing to set to make it a seamless transition is the physics of the velocity, the angular velocity, and also the arm, the velocity or angular velocity for the arm. So let's do that now. So I'm just going to get the component of rigid body and make sure that's 2D. And we want to set the velocity. So Unity, I think, actually just recently changed this. It was velocity, just velocity before, but now it is linear velocity, which is fine. And we want to set this to our own velocity, so it's a seamless transition. And I'm just going to actually store rigid body RB this way that we can just get it on start. This way I just have a nice reference to our rigid body, and we'll set it to our current rigid body velocity right now. And yeah, this was just to create just a simple reference. I could have just done GIP component rigid body right here, but since we're using it multiple times, it's just nice to have a reference. So that's the first thing we want to do. We also want to do this for the angular velocity. Let's do that. And again, we just want to set it to our angular velocity, but there's a difference. Okay, I forgot to make this 2D. Okay, so that's good. We now have gotten the linear velocity and the angular velocity. The only thing left to do is to do it for that arm component. So let me jump back here to the player quick. We have this arm component, which I named arm pivot. This is where the arm's actually moving around. For some reason, the sprite's not showing, but the arm moves around this, and it has a rigid body itself for actually rotating and all that angular physics. So that's the component we want to get. Let me just check. So it's under body, and then it's under that. So I'll need that path. So I'm going to do R, and I'm going to do transform. And instead of using the actual names, I'm just going to do the indices. So this is get child 0. And then the second one was get child 1. So let me check if that was right. So get the first child, and then with this child, we get index 1, which is actually the second child, which is our pivot. So that's correct. And what we want to do is get that rigid body, and we're setting the angular velocity. And what we want to do is set it to our own arm's angular velocity. So everything we're doing is just copying. And this, I'll do transform child. So basically just want to do the same path. And get component, rigid body. There we go. So it's a long line. I'm just gonna make this shorter. So it's easier to read. Float. And something like that. Okay, so with all this set now, we set the transform of the position rotation. We set the ragdoll's velocity, angular velocity, and we set the arm's angular velocity. So that should be everything in place. The only thing to do now is to actually deactivate our own game object, the game object on this script. So I'm going to do game object dot set active and then set it to false. And that should be it for right now. Let's check if this works. So jumping back to here, I'm on the player game object. I just need to set this ragdoll object, and in the first video, I believe it was, we actually created this, or I imported in this ragdoll player object, which is just the physics of the player. So I'm just gonna drag that in right there. So that's our ragdoll player, and that's gonna be the object that we're creating every time that we die. So let's see, if this works. So the second player, I'm just gonna go over here, go over to the edge, and let's see if it, okay, so it looks like it definitely died. We can check that there was a new object created. This is the ragdoll player, and it was, at least at what I saw, is pretty seamless. It created the object without any stutter, so that's good. And everything, the rotation seemed fine, so that looks all good. Now the only thing that I would like is that the camera stop following. Well, the camera just is still following that deactivated object right here. So if I move this, this is the deactivated object that we were previously following, and it's still following that. I would like it to switch over to this newly created object that we created here. So let's do that now. This is where I definitely don't have as much experience, because I'm going to try doing a different method. Basically, this is something called C# events. And yeah, this is an area that I haven't had that much experience with, but I think it will make the code much more organized, way easier to handle with. And this is one of the reasons why I think Getaway Shootout, the original code, was just so messy, because it had everything attached everywhere in different scripts. So I'm going to go forth with this method of notifying the camera that the player has died. So let me actually show you what I'm talking about. I'm not doing a great job of explaining this, but let's go and actually create this event. So we want to know, the camera wants to know when this function gets called. And I could do something like get our camera, there's a reference to our camera, something like that, and say we died, and give it our player script. That works, but now, as I was saying, there's a way to do this called C# events that will make this process much more seamless, and also just make it so our player doesn't have to worry about our camera, doesn't have to worry about other things. They just reference us. So how we do that is creating an event. So I'm going to create a public event, and this is where we want to give it the type. I'm just going to do action right now, and give it a player. I'll explain this in a little bit, but just setting this up, and on death event. So I created an event. I'll explain exactly what all these parameters mean, but basically when we die, we want this on death event to fire. And it can be null, so I'm doing the question mark, and the way to fire it is called invoke. And because I gave it a type player here, I'll have to pass in the player as the parameter. Basically, this action is just saying there'll be an event fired with a parameter called player. So I'm going to pass in the player, and that's just going to be ourselves. So that's good. Now, as I was saying, I want the camera to actually notify or to subscribe to this event. So I'm going to jump over to our camera controller, game camera controller, and we want to subscribe to this event that we just created. And luckily we get we have the player object right here, so we can subscribe to this event in the start method, and I'm going to do that here. So player object get component player, and I want to subscribe to that on death event. So the way the notation to do this is doing this plus equal, and I'll have to give it a function to call when that fires. So I'm going to create a function. I'm going to say on player death. Oops. Okay, so on player death. That looks great, and we just want to give it a parameter player and set the player there. I guess for right now we're not even going to use this parameter, but I'll just pass it in. So we'll do on player death and set it like that. So this should be called every time. Let's just debug it right now. Camera was notified of player death. Let's see if that triggers in our console. So again, I'm going to test if the player dies, and to speed this up, I'm just going to drag player manually. Player clone. Just going to drag them and then drop them. Okay, so we got that message that the camera was notified that the player's death, and I'm just assuming this was the correct camera for player 2. So that all seems great. And yeah, that's just a quick overview of how that event works. I definitely recommend actually reading up on this yourself. There's probably plenty of great resources and tutorials on events, and I'm learning about them as myself to actually write better code. So that's going to be something ongoing in this series. Now we're not doing anything yet. So what we want to do is actually now follow the ragdoll player. And that's not going to be this object. So what I'm going to do is actually jump back to our player script. And so instead of notifying that instead of notifying that I'm passing in this player, I'd like to notify that there's a new ragdoll player so that can follow that component. So either on death event we'll pass in the ragdoll, or we can create another event called on ragdoll event. let's see, for right now, I'm just going to do a different event and actually save this on death event for later. And I'm going to just call this on ragdoll create event. There is ways to pass in multiple parameters, but I'm just going to make it simple for right now and create a whole separate script. So I'm going to give it a transform. So this is going to be our parameter. That's going to be our ragdoll that's passing through to the function. So I'll keep this on death event in there, as I said, but we'll also call this on ragdoll create event and invoke and give it our ragdoll object. So this is just going to be the R and give it the transform and save that, and then just jump back to here. So we'll rename this on player ragdoll and set that. And this is actually going to be a transform. And all we want to do, set this also as well, is to follow this ragdoll now. And that's pretty simple with the camera follow script that we already created. So all we have to do is get component of the camera follow and set the target to be that ragdoll target. And previously in the video, we have this parameter that we created called snap to target. Since the player is going to be at the same spot, I'm just going to leave it to false, since it shouldn't matter either way, but we'll create it like that. So let's now jump back to the scene and see if this is all working. So we would hope to see that now the player smoothly jumps and follows the ragdoll object. Okay, so you can't even tell that it's switched, but it definitely, the camera is now following the ragdoll player. So if you move the ragdoll, it's now following that. And that works great. So that's solving the camera issue. The last thing to do now is just to respawn the player. And I think that's a good job for the game manager. Since we're already creating the players, I think it'd be nice for the game manager to spawn the players as well, or respawn the players as well. So this is where I'm going to then use this on death event and have the game manager subscribe to that. So I'm going to jump to the game manager and now subscribe to this on death event. So I'm going to first create the function for that. So void on player death, and again we need that parameter, and this could be actually named anything, but it needs to be of type player. And we'll save the logic to do of what to do with this in a few seconds, but first I just want to subscribe to that. So when we create the players at the beginning of the game, we just want to get this method. So I'm going to say player.i, players.i, since we just set the reference right here. I'm going to say on death event, and then give it our own death event, so on player death, and set that true. Now, I've actually been doing something pretty bad here, and I'll actually fix this right now. So in our camera controller, I've subscribed to this event, but I never unsubscribe, and that's always something that you want to do. And it will handle this automatically if it's just a non-static event. But for static events, you definitely want to unsubscribe. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So I'm just going to do this, and we'll need a reference to our player. So I'm going to create a reference up here, player. So I'm gonna do something like this. Player equals. So I'm just doing some refactoring right now to make it better. And now we can easily just reference that player. But okay, now the main thing is we want to unregister when this object gets disabled. So the way to do that is just to do the same thing. This is on ragdoll event. And instead of plus equal, we want to do minus equal. And it already auto-completed. And we just give it the function name. And it wouldn't be a huge deal if we forgot this, since, as I was saying, the event isn't static. But it's good practice, and yeah, you potentially might be using static events in the future, so it's always great to do that. Let me now jump back to what we were doing before with the game manager. So same thing with this. I want to unregister this event, so I'm going to do pretty much the same thing. On disable, we want just to loop through our players. I'm just going to go players.length here, and we want to do the same unsubscribe. So on death event minus equals player death. Now, it already is a little cumbersome that we have to loop through each player twice, loop through here and loop through here, and they're all just calling the same function. So I'll get to this maybe a little bit or in a future video. It would be nice to actually have some sort of system to just like combine all these events into one, so we don't have to individually subscribe to each player. But for right now, I'm just going to continue onwards just with this setup. So now we get a reference to when the player dies, and all we want to do with the game manager for right now is just to respawn the player. So in Getaway Shootout, it's, I think, a timeout of 5 seconds. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a timeout of 5 seconds. And in Unity, they have something called IEnumerator, which is just a fancy function that allows you to delay inside of it. So I'm going to call this respawn player loop. And I'm going to give it a player parameter again. And basically, as I was saying, it allows you to yield inside the function. So I'm going to yield return new wait for seconds. And this is where we want to wait the amount of time to respawn. So in the future, I'll make this an actual setting that we can set in some sort of file. But for right now, I'm just going to hard code it. And so we wait this time, and then after that, we want to do some sort of respawn player here. And that's just going to be basically player and basically just setting it active. So game object to set active, true. Oops. And the only other thing is this will set active at the previous death position, but we want to actually respawn at like a respawn point. And currently we don't have respawn points in the game. So I'm just going to temporarily set the player to the position of just 0, the origin, which is where the players are spawning in the game currently. So that should be fine. And the last thing to do is just actually call this. And the way to call these fancy functions is called the start coroutine, and basically calling the function with that parameter. So that should be working all good. And yeah, so we can actually test this out. Now, well, actually, I'll actually show you what is wrong right now, but it should be working mostly. So I'm just gonna quickly drag this player over here. Okay, so it dies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, now a new player got created, but now this is the problem I'm talking about is the object, the camera follow did not change. It is still following the old ragdoll player, which is not what we want. We want to jump back to this original player object. And there's just a simple solution. We just want to notify, again, this game camera object, wherever, or this game camera controller, that, hey, we're back to active, follow us again. So there's multiple ways of doing this. We could have the game manager to do this, and actually, hey, player component, dot your camera, follow your player again, or something like that, call it a method. But I think this is another great time to actually use events again. So I'm going to do that now, is to make an event, and I'm going to actually put it on the player again and make this a public event action. I guess we don't really need any parameter. So on respawn, we'll call it. So this will be called when the player respawns. And I'm just going to create a public function to call respawn. So this hasn't been called yet, but I'll call it in from the game manager. And one thing we want to do, obviously, when we respawn, we want to set this active to true, this game object active to true. And I'm going to quickly remove this from our game manager since we're doing that there. And while we're here, I'm just going to call this respawn function and jump back to the player. So as I was saying, we want to have this event now. So again, it's a simple calling on respawn. And then the question mark just ensures that it isn't null. So invoke it, and there's no parameters to pass in right now. So I'm just going to leave it as is. And now I want to go back to the controller object, and basically we just have another event to subscribe to. So this is going to be the on respawn, and we want to create another function on player respawn. And we want to call that. And then obviously we're going to have to disable it. So always remember to unsubscribe. And then now we just want the function to handle player respawn. So here we can do, well, we have our reference to player already. This is the player that we're following. So we just want to go back to following that. So I'm going to go get component. Well, I'm going to do get component camera follow, but I already see that there's a bunch of redundancy right here. So I'm just going to save this as another reference. So camera follow, call it just CF for short. And I'll set it here. So CF equals camera follow. And basically we can reduce this to make it easier. Okay, so we want cf.set target and back to the original player. And then also we had that snap to target. And I'm trying to think, in the original Getaway Shootout game, I'm pretty sure it doesn't snap right back when you create the player. So I'm going to set this to false, so it smoothly rotates or smoothly transitions back to the original spawn point. And then This is just complaining because we want the transform of that. Okay, so now I'm going to test this out once again. So this time I'm just gonna jump up here, get to the ledge, and let's see if it does this right. So 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5. Okay, then it respawns back at, well, our spawn point is just at this 0 location. But then, yeah, the camera snapped back and we're back to controlling player. So all this is handled pretty nicely. We can also die again. Our previous player was there. And then again, respawn. The respawn time does seem a little off right now. That seems a little long. I'll maybe after this video just check for the exact respawn amount. It's probably shorter. But yeah, this is all working, that our player is able to continue respawning, dying. The only thing is you can see that players are going to stack up quickly, especially if there's a lot of death in the scene that you were playing in. So what is done in Getaway Shootout is that the ragdolls do destroy after a certain amount of time. And that's something that we can do quickly as well. So I'm just going to create a simple object, a simple script, and I'm going to call this, I'll call it destroy, we'll call it just destroy object for right now. And all this is just going to do is going to be a simple, well, one, how long till you destroy this object, and basically all we want to do is call this. So I think there is a destroy function, destroy game object, and actually we even can pass in a float of time. So actually it seems like Unity already actually handles this timeout function. So I don't think we need this for right now. I'm gonna jump back to, let's see, where was, okay, player. I'm gonna jump back to here because it seemed like we can actually do this ourselves. When we create ragdoll, we just want to do this destroy method. So game object.destroy. Let's see, why would that, not our, maybe I guess it isn't, let's see, our, I'm not exactly sure, because it's, okay, hold on. So it's like this, destroy is just its own function, and you call it by passing in the object you want to destroy. So this is just the R ragdoll object, and you can give it the time here. So this is probably another setting that we want to have in some settings file, but for right now we'll hard code maybe like 15 seconds and do that. So that looks good like that. I just forgot there's this destroy function and it already has a timeout built in, so that is nice to have. I guess this brings a good mentioning to this sort of setup works where you instantiate a new ragdoll and destroy it every time. But a great optimization, and what we might get to later in the series, is actually to use something called an object pool. Basically, the object pool instantiates a bunch of ragdolls at the beginning of the game, or however many you want. And that way you don't have to keep calling instantiate. You just set active of ragdoll and then deactivate it at the end, because these instantiate and destroy methods are pretty costly, and you can notice it in your performance if you're creating a lot of objects. you're definitely going to have performance impacts and lags. So that might be one thing that we might get on later in the series, is to actually do a player or pool object later. So I'll just leave a little note here. Game pool, pool object system in the future. Yeah, so possibly do that in the future. And then I'm just going to remove this script since we actually didn't use it. So I'm going to click delete. Actually, I'm going to delete it in the Unity editor, just make sure we don't have any missing links. Okay, so I'm just going to test out this destroy function, and that will be the end of this video. So let me just check that out right now. So again, player comes to the edge, and yeah, dies, and then it'll respawn. But then after 15 seconds, this object over here should disappear. And as we're waiting for that, one thing that we have done is the actual player sprites. The ragdoll it just has the default sprite, and that will be one thing once we set character sprites, is that we want it to actually copy that sprite from the original player. But yeah, I think we might get to creating player sprites in the future. But for right now, it looks like it is working. Both players can die, both players can respawn. So that looks great for now. In the next video, I think this is getting to a good time where we can actually implement a little more to the death system. Specifically, I want to add a health system that does the same thing, but adds functionality to add health points to the character. So basically, this will be useful when we create weapons that can take away your health, and then if your health reaches a certain amount, you obviously call that die function that we're calling earlier. So that will be most likely the next video in the series. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned.